If you saw those mountains, you'd think the world was already over. It was like the sky had shattered, and every step Naya Viral took felt like a whisper of goodbye between broken stones and dead roots. The floating cities, once dancing on the clouds, were now nothing but twisted shadows on the horizon, consumed by the void that was swallowing everything without a care. She ran, not looking back. In her right hand, she gripped an old lantern stained with dried blood and soot. In her left, a map marked with a symbol that felt wrong. There was something in that line, that broken curve, that sent chills straight to her bones. She had no idea what those two objects meant, but every fiber of her being knew she couldn't leave them behind. It was like that faint flame inside the lantern was the only thing still alive in this shattered world. The wind cut through like glass. The clouds swirled like dust devils, and up above, the beasts of the void hunted in silence. Naya had seen one of them up close. Huge, no eyes, a body made of forgotten memories, and tentacles that seemed to whisper names she'd never spoken. Since that day, something inside her had changed. The map burned when she slept. The lantern flickered on its own, as if answering voices that weren't there. And now, in the middle of the Twilight Mountains, she tripped over an old man, his eyes covered with a torn linen cloth, sitting among the rubble of a time long gone. He didn't introduce himself. He just said, "The map doesn't show where to go, it shows where you never wanted to return." She swallowed hard, but before she could ask anything, the old man was already standing, pointing north with a staff cracked by time. That's when Caden showed up. A warrior with a tired face, scars all over, and eyes carrying the memories of 100 battles. He came out of the shadows like he already knew he'd find Naya there. And he didn't say hey, didn't ask who she was. He just asked for the lantern. When she tried to hide it, he pulled her coat sleeve and showed her something no one else should have seen. A mark identical to the one on the map, branded on his own wrist. He didn't explain how he got it. He just said it was time to leave before the next tear in the sky opened. Because every time the sky ripped, the world died a little more. And that night, the ether roared like a hungry beast. They kept going together, crossing trails that didn't exist anymore and bridges that were only standing out of sheer stubbornness. Caden's presence seemed to calm the lantern, which now shone brighter whenever he got close. And even though he didn't speak much, he watched Naya with a look that mixed doubt and hope. Like he was waiting for something from her, or afraid of what she might become. As for the old man who they started calling Zarin, he seemed guided by some ancient instinct. He talked about times before time, when the flames still burned pure in the hearts of men and cities flew on the breath of the ether. And even when the world started to crumble, he believed there was still a spark of rebirth left. Something inside her that hadn't woken up yet. Naya listened but didn't fully believe. How could she believe in rebirth in a world where everything born was already dying? Where trees screamed when the void passed and memories rotted in the air? Still, something inside her pulsed differently. At night, when the wind calmed, she felt the lantern vibrating like it was answering her dreams. Dreams that weren't hers. She dreamed of wars between beings of light and shadow, of temples sinking into the sea, of a golden flame trapped inside her chest. When she woke up, there was always a tear in the corner of her eye, but she never knew why. And the map, once still, began to change slightly. Lines appeared on their own, like the paper was drawing the path as she walked. It was one of those nights when it happened. While Zarin slept and Caden stood watch, Naya stared at the lantern. Something inside changed. It was like a spark danced behind the cracked glass, but it wasn't normal. It was alive. And for a moment, she saw the face of a woman reflected there. A woman with the same eyes as hers, holding the same lantern, but surrounded by flames and chaos. It was quick. An echo. But strong enough to make her heart race. When Caden approached, asking if she was okay, she couldn't hide it. She said she felt something burning inside. Like the void had left a space in her. A space that was now beginning to fill up. Caden, for the first time, looked genuinely scared. He said he knew stories about this. That the flame, when it wakes up, can either heal or destroy. And if she didn't learn to control it, the world wouldn't wait. The void doesn't wait. It moves forward. Zarin woke up from the conversation and, unsurprisingly, completed the prophecy. That lantern wasn't just a light. It was a lost beacon from an ancient era, capable of guiding or consuming, depending on who carries it. And in that moment, the two of them looked at Naya like she was more than just a survivor. Like she was a key. The road kept getting harder. beasts rose from the ground. The mountains trembled like they were crying. The map was now pointing to a forgotten place, north of the shattered clouds, where they say time stopped and the ether sleeps. Naya felt the strength inside her growing. But with it came doubts, pain, memories she didn't know were hers or not. And the strangest thing, whispers. Soft voices, calling her name like they'd known her before the world fell apart. Every step now was more than just a flight. It was a quest for answers. And no matter how much Caden tried to protect her, he knew that sooner or later, the real fight would be hers alone. When they reached the last breath cliff, the sky was on fire. Not ordinary fire, but blue flames swirling in spirals that didn't obey the wind. The ground pulsed like an ancient heart, and down below, you could see the remnants of a fallen floating city, swallowed by gray mists. Zarin kneeled and said their time was running out. The next crack in the sky would happen in 3 nights, and after that, not even the ether could save what remained. Naya sat at the edge of the abyss, feeling the lantern burn like never before. And without knowing exactly why, she whispered, "I'm going all the way, and I'll take this flame with me." Caden stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. He didn't say a word, but in that silence she understood. From that moment on, she was no longer just a girl with a lantern and a strange map. It was the beginning of something bigger. Something that maybe had already started long ago, but was now finally waking up. The rebirth wouldn't come from the sky. It would come from her. And deep down in the hidden corner of her heart, Naya knew. The journey was just beginning. The cold wind sliced through the night like sharp blades, and the sound of their own footsteps echoed in the ruins of the fortress. Naya, with the little lantern barely lighting the way ahead, felt like she was walking on the ashes of a world that no longer existed. The map, carefully folded in her hands, seemed to pulse with strange energy, as if it knew more about what was going to happen than she did. With every step, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, and fear mixed with a burning curiosity that blazed inside her. The guardian, Caden, walked beside her, his face weary and marked by war. His eyes were fixed ahead, but the exhaustion was evident in every line of his face. "You shouldn't be here, Naya," he murmured, his voice hoarse as if the very earth was trying to swallow his words. He had seen the guardians fall, each of them sacrificing themselves to maintain the balance of the ether, but now something felt different. Something about the girl made Caden's fear grow, and he knew she was more connected to the ancient power than he was willing to believe. Zarin, the oldest and quietest of the group, suddenly stopped, feeling the air shift around them. His eyes scanned the ancient temple, now buried in ruins, but even there, the air seemed thick with something, a presence that went beyond what he could understand. "The light of the lamp," he said, pointing to the small flame burning in Naya's lantern. "It shouldn't be shining like this. This isn't normal." Naya looked at the lamp, almost with reverence, as if the flame inside it was the last reminder of a distant past. When she held it closer, an inscription appeared on the wall in front of her, text written in a forgotten language, one she had never learned. The words danced on the stone as if they were alive, and her mind began to twist trying to understand the meaning, but all she could feel was a wave of heat that started to invade her skin, as if the flame itself was expanding inside her. Caden stepped forward, closing his eyes as he muttered something unintelligible. Zarin watched the girl with an intense gaze, but instead of worry, what he felt now was something more like admiration. Something was awakening in her, something stronger than any power the Guardians had. He saw her fight against fear, against the unknown, and when the flames from the lamp began to expand even more, lighting up an ancient symbol on the fortress ceiling, Zarin understood. "She's not just an heir, Caden. She's a source," Zarin said with unsettling calm, as if he already knew this even before Naya understood. Caden looked at him, his eyes wide. "A source?" he asked, his voice breaking the tension in the air. "You mean to say, she has the power of the ether inside her?" Naya still didn't know what that meant, but Zarin's words echoed in her mind, as if something had awoken inside her. The inner flame, a new energy, a connection to something much bigger than her. Caden's fear was now a shadow retreating in the face of the growing presence of power that Naya barely understood, but that she could already feel. The creature from the reflected fire appeared on the horizon, its flaming form like a distorted shadow against the dim light of the lantern. Caden pulled Naya back, his gaze fierce as if he was ready to face the beast. But Naya, driven by an impulse she didn't understand, took a step forward. The flame in her hand began to grow, and a wave of heat filled the air, making the ground tremble beneath her feet. She looked at the creature, her fiery eyes now an extension of the power forming inside her. The creature hesitated, as if it felt the same power emanating from Naya. The battle was about to begin, and she now knew that her destiny was intertwined with the ether in a way she could never have predicted. The only thing left was to decide what to do with it, how to control the fire burning inside her. Naya looked at Kaden and Zarin, and the tension in the air was palpable. Kaden, with a look of urgency, grabbed his sword and prepared for the fight. If you don't control this, the world is going to burn. And with every word he spoke, the weight of what was to come grew heavier. She felt the pressure, the echo of something about to explode, and her inner flame ignited with force. It was stronger than ever, but that made her even more vulnerable to what was coming. The dawn brought with it a golden light that seemed to paint the ruins in a mystical way, as if time itself bent before that place. Naya stood there at the top of the broken stairs, staring at the horizon, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of thoughts that haunted her. The ether's power inside her was still rising, and every day it felt harder to control the storm brewing within her. It was like she was being pulled by something bigger, an ancient force she couldn't fully understand. Kaden and Zarin were off at a distance, whispering about their next move, but Naya couldn't clearly hear them. Her mind was fixed on the images flashing before her eyes. Fragmented memories of a lost bloodline, of ancient battles, of sacrifices echoing through time. A bloodline of the Guardians, once strong but now broken, almost extinct. And she, Naya, was the key to its resurgence. The truth started to weigh heavily on her shoulders. There was no turning back. The legacy of the Guardians she carried inside her wasn't a blessing. It was a burden. She was the last, and the responsibility pressing down on her was overwhelming. But fear, contrary to what she'd thought, no longer controlled her. Something inside her was growing stronger, more confident. A flame that, instead of consuming her, was lighting the way forward. "It's weird," Zarin said, walking up to Naya, his voice deep and distant as always. "I always thought the awakening of the Guardian's legacy would bring destruction. But you're different. What you carry inside you isn't just power. It's a possibility." Kaden was now by Naya's side, his gaze focused and concerned. The possibility of something grand or the end of everything. The ether is a force that's never been controlled by someone this young, Naya. You need to understand that. Whatever you do, it needs to be quick and calculated. Naya didn't know if she was ready for this. Everything around her felt like a puzzle she still couldn't piece together. The only thing she was sure of was that the power inside her wouldn't let her take the easy path. But there was something, a spark of hope, telling her she could control that power, that she wasn't alone. That night, Naya dreamed of the Guardians from the past. Their figures were blurred as if they were in another dimension, but the faces were there. She recognized the look in her own reflection, as if those men and women weren't just distant ancestors, but people who had walked the same paths, made the same tough choices, and been swept away by the same fate. The awakening of the legacy wasn't just about power. It was about choices. The power she carried was both a blessing and a curse. To protect the world, she would have to face not only the external forces threatening everything she knew, but also the battle inside herself. The next morning, the group began descending the hills surrounding the ruins. The sky was overcast, and the wind carried with it a sense that something big was about to happen. Kaden, as always, was alert, his eyes scanning every part of the landscape for any sign of danger. Zarin, on the other hand, seemed to be in another world, lost in thought, as if he were in communion with something only he understood. "We need to reach the Temple of Light before the forces of ruin get there," Kaden said, urgency in his voice. "They're already on their way. And unless you, Naya, figure out how to control that power, we're all gonna die." Those words weighed heavily on her, but Naya didn't let herself be shaken. She wasn't the same girl who'd started this journey. The fear that once controlled her was now being replaced with something stronger. She felt the power becoming part of her, like she was being shaped for something greater. Still, as they moved down the narrow path, the weight of fate seemed to grow heavier with each step. With every step, it felt like time was speeding up, like the world itself was in a race against the clock. She knew that as the ether expanded within her, her choices were becoming even more critical. The key to the future was in her hands, but what she would do with it was a question she still didn't have an answer to. When they reached the valley below, the horizon lit up with a strange, almost supernatural light. Something was coming, something big. And even though Naya didn't know exactly what it was, she felt that this was the last chance to stop the ruin that was approaching. It was the moment when fate would reveal itself once and for all. Those words echoed in Naya's mind as the group moved toward the Temple of Light. The battle against the Void wasn't just a saying. It was their destiny, a silent war fought between what was left of life and the looming threat of annihilation. Above them, the weight of reality was becoming more and more oppressive, like the very air around them was charged with a dark energy that threatened to swallow everything in its path. The wind was cutting through the air with an unusual fierceness, ripping away chunks of trees and debris scattered along the path. The smell of wet earth mixed with something metallic hung in the air, as if the world itself was gearing up for something terrible. Zarin, usually so calm, was walking faster now, his gaze fixed on the horizon, like he was waiting for something he knew was about to happen. Caden, on the other hand, was silent, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him with every step. He knew what was at stake, and he also knew that without Naya, all their hopes would be in vain. The ether inside her was the only thing that could reverse the chaos the ruin forces were about to bring. Still, the uncertainty lingered, like a cloud just waiting to burst. "We need to pick up the pace," Caden said, his voice low and determined, breaking the silence. "The Temple of Light won't be there forever. And the Void never forgives." Naya felt a chill run through her body. It wasn't the wind. It was the growing power of the Void. Something inside her reacted to its presence, like her body knew what was coming before her mind could fully process it. Each step took her deeper into the heart of the darkness, and she knew the time was nearing to face who she really was. Zarin came closer, his words cutting through Naya's growing fear. "The Void isn't just an external force. It's inside you too, Naya. It's inside all of us in some way. It's not just the enemy you see, but the thing that hides in the shadows of our own spirits." Those words weighed heavily on Naya, like an immense burden. It was as if she was the last line of defense, not just against external forces, but against the weaknesses that lived in her own soul. She remembered everything she'd been through, the struggles, the losses, the choices that had shaped her up until now. But at the same time, an unexpected strength was growing inside her. The awakening of the legacy wasn't just about power. It was about finding the truth within herself and using it to face what was coming. The Temple of Light was now in sight. But something was wrong. The air felt thicker, the sensation that time was warping grew stronger with every second. Naya felt a strange sensation, like something was watching them from afar, waiting for the right moment to strike. The ruins of the temple, normally a symbol of hope and protection, now seemed like a place of impending terror. "We're being watched," Caden said quietly, but with the same urgency as always. "We can't keep going like this." Suddenly the wind shifted. A cold gust of air surrounded them, and a thick fog began to form around them. Naya felt a growing pressure on her shoulders, like an invisible hand was tightening around her throat. The ether inside her stirred, but not in a way she could control. It was as if something was trying to take over her. It was when the fog cleared that the real battle began. From the mist, a figure emerged. It wasn't human, but something distant, something terrifying. The Void had many forms, but all of them were equally horrifying. It was a shadow, a mass of darkness that seemed to form and deform at the same time, like it was in constant flux. "This isn't good," Zarin said, his eyes wide with the looming threat. He was already holding his sword, but the figure before them seemed to be more than anything they'd faced so far. It was like the very concept of darkness had taken physical form. Naya tried to focus, but the pressure inside her kept growing. The power of the ether was expanding, but without control, it was about to consume everything she was. "I don't know if I can," she started, her voice trembling. "You don't have a choice," Caden said, with a determination only he had. "The fate of the world is in your hands. Remember who you are." In that moment, something inside Naya lit up. It wasn't just fear anymore, but an awareness of what she truly carried within herself. The Void, the forces of darkness, weren't something to be feared. They were something to be faced. She wasn't a lost child anymore. She was the guardian of the legacy, and it was her mission to protect everything that was left of life. With a shout of determination, she invoked the ether with all her might, feeling it expand within her until it became a wave of pure light. The darkness before her began to retreat, like the very power of light itself was pushing it back. Naya could feel the energy vibrating inside her. A wave of light so pure it almost cut through her from the inside out. The ether was stronger than ever, but also more unstable. She had no idea how much longer she could keep it under control, or how far the power she now carried could tip the balance between light and dark. The figure in front of them, the manifestation of the void, seemed to almost smile, as if waiting for her to fail. Think you can beat the void with that weakness? The voice that echoed from the dark being was deep, filled with contempt. I am the absence of everything. You can't defeat what has no form. Zarin moved quickly to protect Naya, his sword glowing with a blue light that seemed to reflect the very inner battle she was fighting. We're not fighting you, we're fighting for what's left of our humanity, he shouted, his voice full of bravery. Caden, standing beside him, also readied for battle. The darkness ain't invincible. It only gets stronger when you stop believing in the light. Naya shut her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of their words. The truth was right there, pulsing in her heart. The void wasn't just an external enemy, it was an internal force, something everyone shared in their fear, doubts, and weaknesses. What she had to defeat wasn't the being in front of her, but the shadow within herself, the darkness she feared. With a cry of pure courage, Naya summoned the ether's power with unimaginable force, letting it burst out of her body like a wave of pure light. The ground shook beneath her feet as she felt her soul expand, the light spreading through every cell of her being. She knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed her friends, their trust, their hope. Together. Caden shouted, raising his sword. Our bond is stronger than any darkness. And as if the universe itself had heard their words, the light emanating from Naya merged with the glow of Caden and Zarin's swords, creating a wave of energy that surrounded the landscape around them. The void tried to resist, trying to swallow the light, but it was too strong now, fed by the faith the three of them had in each other. The battle was fierce, but their united strength proved stronger than any darkness the void could summon. The shadows began to dissolve before the light, and the dark figure before them slowly began to fade, reduced to nothing. But even as victory seemed within reach, Naya knew there was more to be done. The ether, though victorious, was running out inside her. She felt the power slipping away, like her body couldn't hold it any longer. The light was shining bright, but she knew that light only existed because she was sacrificing something of herself. She couldn't carry this burden alone, but in that moment, it was the only way to save everyone. Naya, no. Caden shouted, his face filled with panic as he realized what was happening. You don't have to do this. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a wisdom she never knew she had. It's my destiny, Caden. The light would never be strong enough without sacrifice. Sometimes we have to lose something to secure the future. With one last breath, Naya released all the ether's power in a burst of light so intense it seemed to tear the very sky apart. The energy spread across the world, healing the earth's wounds, banishing the darkness and bringing a new dawn. And in a moment of pure peace, the darkness was finally eradicated. The void was gone, but the cost was high. Naya collapsed to her knees, her body exhausted, her energy completely drained. But even so, she smiled. She knew she had completed her mission. The world was saved, and all she needed to do was give one last offering, her own strength to ensure everyone else's survival. Zarin and Caden rushed to her, trying to support her. No, you can't, Zarin said, his voice choked. Naya looked at them, her eyes still glowing with the light of sacrifice. I'm just the guardian of the legacy. The real strength is in each of you. The future is yours. With one last smile, Naya closed her eyes, knowing the balance had been restored. The sacrifice of her own life ensured the world would carry on, but the legacy of light would live on, alive in the actions of those who remained. Those who had followed their path weren't the same anymore, but the world, now free from the void, was ready for a fresh start. The dawn was breaking on the horizon, and Caden and Zarin knew their journey wasn't over yet. They had to keep going, not just for Naya but for everyone else whose fates were intertwined with theirs. The journey was far from over, but for now, the darkness had been defeated. The future, as always, would be written by the choices they still had to make. The world once again was breathing with new hope. The darkness that had covered the hearts of men and women for so long was now just a distant memory, swept away by the strength of a sacrifice that would never be forgotten. Naya's legacy, the guardian of the ether, would live on in the hearts of all those who continued her journey. Her light didn't fade with her death, but was passed on to everyone who dared to dream of a better future. Zarin and Caden, now the new guardians of hope, looked out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise again, painting the sky with the colors of rebirth. They knew there was still a lot to be done. The scars of the world would be healed, but the memories of the battle and the sacrifice would never fade. Their journey had started with uncertainty and fear, but now, with the weight of what they had lost and gained, they were stronger, wiser. The friendship, courage, and determination they shared were more than enough to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Naya's legacy would guide them, and fate, now clearer than ever, was calling. They looked at each other, and in the shared silence, mutual understanding bloomed. The light that had been sparked wasn't just a flame burning inside them, but a flame that would light the way for everyone willing to fight for what's right. The void had been defeated, but the real work was just beginning. The battle wasn't only against the external darkness, but against the internal doubts everyone carried. "Let's move forward," Caden said, his voice firm, but with the softness that only true wisdom can bring. "There's no turning back now." Zarin nodded. There never was. And together, under the rising sun, they walked toward the future. A future where shadows might always try to return, but where the light of their sacrifice, their journey, and their friendship would always prevail. The world might have been saved, but the real battle would always be in what people chose to become. They had given everything they had, and now, with Naya's legacy in their hearts, they were ready for anything. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. As long as there was light in their hearts, the void would never win. If you like this story, don't forget to leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories like this. See you in the next video.